What's up, gang? Doc and Jock podcast. Coach Joe, Doc Danny, Jill Miller is on the show again for take two. So Jill, I guess we're doing something right. You weren't afraid to come back for a second appearance, so we wanted to thank you for that. And we also wanted to say congratulations for you. Since we've talked to you last, you've actually brought a new human into the world. So briefly touch on some of that. What's life like with the new kiddo running around?
I don't think I can clearly say what life is like. I mean, you all are parents of many children.
Yep. 3.
It's right. And Danny, you have 2, right?
Yeah, so five between us makes us sound better.
Yeah.
Plus 2 is 7. So yeah, I'm a
That's
breeder.
right.
I'm a breeder now. It's great. The nuclear family thing, the amount of fun we have as a family of 4, even though little baby boy Asher is almost 7 weeks old and can't contribute fully, but just watching my daughter Lila nurture him and be obsessed with him and care for him, and managing my own emotions around siblingness, because I had a completely contentious, still to this day, relationship with my own sister. To watch them show me what siblings can be like is huge, and I'm learning so much from them, and I have more love in my life than I've ever had. It's amazing.
It's super cool social media is kind of like everybody stalks everybody else, but to see pictures of like little pictures or videos of your kids stuff, it's cool because it reminds me of when my kids were younger, and it's interesting. It's an interesting time in your life as a parent, number one, but what's interesting is to see your daughter respond so well to your son. And
yeah,
we had the flip side of that. We had a son and then had a daughter, and my son wouldn't acknowledge our daughter for probably about a month. Like, would walk around her, wouldn't look at her, cried, and like ran out of the room in the hospital. So you've got it going on. Whatever you guys are doing is right.
I've got the chills just thinking about that and the probability of what you're describing happening. So I feel really, really lucky that this little girl is baby obsessed and just wanted another kid in her life. So we hit the jackpot, and he's very amenable to her mildly crushing him and, sniffing his face and poking him and headbutting him. I mean, that's been like terrifying, is to manage her enthusiasm, but we're getting there.
It's funny. You talk about Jack not like acknowledging the baby early on. For me, I'm not really a baby guy, and it's hard for me to acknowledge. Like, I love the infants, but for me, like, to me, there's nothing attractive about an infant. Like, they're ugly. They smell like a towel dipped in schmeg. Like, they're just like stale kind of.
What is schmeg?
Oh, you don't know it's well, I, like most Western men, I have been not only vasectomized, I've had the other thing done, the other procedure most guys do. But if you don't snip the tip, a crust will develop underneath that foreskin, and that's schmeg.
I didn't know that was the name of that. Okay.
Yeah, it's weird. It's just, I don't know really what it smells like, but I can imagine
I
it smells
thought
like
it was called schmegma.
Yeah, schmegma.
So I'm okay.
Yeah,
got it.
Yeah, so that's like
Come on, Danny.
that's a slang term. Yeah.
Yeah, I should know that. I thought it was some made up, word of some sort that you were.
Yeah.
I think, well, you're Polish, right, Joe?
I am Polish.
Yeah, well,
right.
maybe it's an Eastern European thing
Maybe.
that we know about, Doc Danny.
That's right.
There you go.
But the point is, like, for me, I'm not a baby guy. Like, they're mine and I love them, but like until they make eye contact and they do stuff, like Lucy's starting to talk, she's got opinions, she wants to get dressed, she wants to do cool stuff. And have you noticed that with guys a little bit? How's your husband respond to the babies and just getting the whole family connected with this infant?
Yeah, it's awkward. I get it. They're like strange neurological rodents, the infants. And you're like, can I get a smile?
Yeah,
can I get like, you're not staring at my eyes. You're like this strange half reptile, half rodent. I know you're going to get cute. There's a lot of poop. You're sucking weird on my boob.
Yep.
But ultimately, the thing is that we're getting 8 hits of oxytocin a day. Like, we're like on junk. We're like completely hormonally infused with heroin from the baby's nursing, if you're blessed to nurse, if you have a chance to nurse, and your husband is not getting it, the men are not getting that. And so it just makes perfect sense that oxytocin hit. It's I love being a woman for that reason. I'm telling you, there is nothing like it. Nothing like it.
So would you suggest any woman who's got a heroin issue, should they get on making a baby and nursing one? I mean, was that maybe something that would, help them out there?
I'm not an addiction medicine specialist, so I'm going to just
good job,
sidestep that. Yeah.
Well, congratulate him for us. They say it takes a man to make a man, so he's obviously a stud. But speaking of getting back after having the baby and kind of getting back into training and back to where you're at before you were even pregnant the second time or even the first time, I've noticed it seems like you're doing a lot of strength training in your training currently, and what I'm interested in is what was the rationale for that, and how's that been going for you?
When I was, let's see, where do I even start? Let's see, I'm a dabbler in many, many movement systems. Strength training when I was, I'd say, at my peak of yoga practice was not even a thought. I mean, I was doing, back in the day, we didn't call it body weight training. Back in the day, we didn't call it primal movement. Back in the day, I was just doing crazy interpretive movement stuff through dance and through yoga. And I wasn't really interested in loaded actions with metal, or elastics or resistance. I just used my body and, did crazy stuff on the floor and on the wall and rock climbing. And I did lots of things that addressed my complete mobility, like consistently that was addressing my mobility. And then down regulation, relaxation techniques. But I wasn't really interested in those harder forms. And when I say a harder form, I mean, lifting, throwing. Throwing was the worst because I was so hypermobile. If I threw, I did actually risk dislocating my shoulder or neck, which did happen. The first time my dad taught me how to swing a golf club, my neck went out, and that ruined a trip to Hawaii.
Wow.
All right. So anyway, but when I started having some pain is always one of those things that gets you doing something new and committing to it. Started having some pain in my left TFL and went to my favorite PT here in LA, Sean Hampton. And this is when I was pregnant with Lila, with my first, who's now 2.5 years old. Started having some pain in my TFL, knew that was kind of the red herring. That was the canary in the coal mine. But basically I had, guess what, Doc Danny, I had weak glutes, right? And all of them. Right. The 3 big ones, the 6 little ones, all of them were weak in that left hip. And so I knew that, and this was during the pregnancy with Lila. And I knew that if I didn't start addressing it, that my pelvis was going to be a mess post birth. And so during the pregnancy, I did the RX from Sean. And of course I was friends with Kelly. So I was really scrutinizing a lot of the mobility WOD videos and taking lessons from that and going to the gym myself and starting to work out my own deadlifts without being coached and building a foundation of coordinated strength. After I had Lila, a random coach contacted me through Facebook who was friends with one of my teachers, and his name is Josh Landis. And he was like, hey, I would love to give you a free personal training session. And so I looked him up. He was just on Facebook. There was not much information about him, but he intrigued me because he'd been studying not just coaching. He had majored in kinesiology, and he was into NKT and PDTR. And so he was a real nerd. I mean, like a total nerd and a strength coach. So I took him up on the free session, and I loved it. I loved him. I loved how, I'm just going to keep using the word nerd, like super nerdy he was about the science of strength and conditioning. And So I started working with him like once a week, about 6 weeks after I had Lila. And I've been working with him ever since and developing a repertoire to tighten my tissues up and to stabilize. And I remember Kelly a few years ago talking to him about the hypermobile body. And his one piece of advice was just basically stiffen the fuck up. And that really resonated because I'm the person that used to be able to put both of my legs behind my head and then wind my arms through the hands or through the legs and be able to hold on to my wrists behind my back. I could reach my arms through extension. And you guys can see me in the camera here. This is obviously not on camera, but I could actually take my arms all the way over my head, just like Jim Carrey, and do the jump rope through my arms. So I had become an elastic mess. And I knew that if I wanted to lift my kids and not get injured going forward in my life, I was going to have to strengthen my body from head to toe. And so that's been the journey. And that's been the goal. The goal has not been how many reps. The goal has not been how much do you lift. It's been about stabilizing myself more. And then the big, beautiful thing that I've learned so much about the strength is that it's given me even more body awareness and it's given me even more proprioception. And if you follow my work through the role model and yoga tune-up, you know that I'm always talking about body sense and proprioception, interoception. I'm a junkie when it comes to sensing myself. Probably because of the hypermobility, I was so loose and slippery on the inside. The strength work has given me even more sense. When I thought it was going to take it away, and it didn't. It's heightened it for me. It's awesome.
Well, very cool. Talk to us about this journey with Josh, and I'm interested in it because you don't hear many of the girls or folks or athletes I know that are into yogi. They would look at a barbell and it would scare them, right? They would think they would lose a lot of what they're trying to gain in there. And I just want to know, like, when you first started with Josh, you said on your own you were getting into some deadlifts, but with Josh and his nerdiness, after talking with you, what was the protocol for getting this hypermobile chick, to sling a barbell around?
Sling a barbell. Well, we don't sling it, that's for sure.
There you go.
I'm extremely conservative. In fact, when he asks me to do rapid stuff, plyometrics, which is a very small dose of the work, that's when I actually give him attitude. I don't know why, but I still have I like to jump rope because it's so contained, but box jumps and some of the other kettlebell swingy things, I still have this weird thing. And I think it goes back to being so unstable that, again, when I swung a golf club, my neck went out. Sure. And I wasn't a sport person. My sister was the sport person. She was the soccer person. She was the softball person. She was the basketball person. She was the volleyball person. And whenever I did sports and moved quickly, Joe, and this is so embarrassing to say, I had accidents.
Got it.
I had accident, not peeing accident, but I had accidents. But I was a dancer, so I did, I jumped and I would do, strategic falls to the floor. So it's not that I didn't move rapidly, but okay. So working with Josh, what was the protocol? I'd say a lot of it was, anti-movement.
Okay.
Like
so eccentric kind of stuff?
Anti-extension, anti-rotation, anti-flexion. It was about getting stable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so walk us through if he's teaching you, so if we're walking through a typical box squat per se, is that the box, were you going box squats with him? Like, what would that look like? Okay, what kind of squatting we picking up?
Front squat, back squat, goblet squat, squat till you dock. No, not squat till you dock, but deadlift, trap bar deadlifts. Oh God, I knew these questions were going to come up. I'm like, oh, they're going to ask me actual exercises.
No, you're good.
And I can rattle off yoga poses like that, but then, oh my gosh, the strength vocabulary.
Well, the goblet squat. The goblet squat's a common one that we've talked about here. I want to know, kind of, when Josh walks hypermobile Jill Miller through like an anti-goblet squat. I'm just trying to get a sense for how you walking through this goblet squat journey would be different from, per se, I take, super tight, high school football player who can barely get down there. What's the difference and what might the cueing be?
All right. Well, what's interesting is I already have a massive command of every joint of my body in terms of having mapped it and in terms of kinesiology. So while Josh actually might have his own cues, I often will refilter them, boom, 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 into my own cue set. Perfect. So that I own the movement. That's been a technique of mine that I've used with lots of teachers for years. I'll adapt their cue set and then I'll ultimately interpret and make it my own. So in terms of like a goblet squat, I'd hold the neck. What is it called? The neck of the kettlebell?
Sure.
The handle of the kettlebell?
Handle, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're good.
Well, thank you.
Call it the neck if you want.
I want to butcher.
There's probably some
terms.
Polish or Russian name, but we don't know it either, Jill. You're good. You're in good hands.
Grab it by the neck.
Yeah.
That sounds better.
You hold the handles of the bell. You hold the handle of the bell. The ball of the bell is up against your sternum. I can't believe I'm describing this. I sound like such a nerd. Depressed shoulders, protracted shoulders, and then ultimately that rib cage and pelvic alignment. So I don't even know what he calls that. I have got my own words for it, but I call that the inner baby carriage, or I call that heart over cervix. Most people don't go there, but yes,
I don't resonate with too many of my people.
Well, let me just tell you, men also have a cervix. It's spelled SIRVIX. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
No, they don't have a cervix, but I try to include everybody in this alignment formula. So rib cage over pelvis, and feet wider than the hips, slightly turned out, activate the glutes, pull the ground apart, and don't lose your spine as you go down. So it's always about maintaining that vertebral column in the context of the squat, whichever squat arrangement I'm doing, whether it's goblet, front squat, back squat, and then just trying to really perceive and interpret the load through the big joints without deviation.
Perfect. So go Danny.
Dead on.
Sorry about that.
I think
yoga
that
people are gonna express it like that.
No, yeah, I think it's just different verbal cues and ways that people conceptualize that and then reproduce what you're saying to them through the movement. But I think that's a great interpretation of it. I really like the fact that your trainer is focused so specifically on kind of that relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis. And I. In particular, postpartum, a lot of patients that I see, I think that's a really challenging aspect for them. They've kind of lost some of that kinesthetic awareness, and regaining it can be really challenging. So having gone through, having childbirth gone twice at this point, having two beautiful, healthy kids, but getting back into training afterward for a lady that maybe is in your same position that's listening to this right now, that's kind of, mobile and not knowing what to do and maybe having some pelvic or lower back issues. What two strength movements are your favorite ones to do? And what would you kind of, tell her to start adding in just to get started?
The deadlift, just plain old school deadlifts. I love them.
Are your Chucks on?
I've got my Vivo Barefoots. Yeah, I don't have Chucks. Maybe someday, Vivo Barefoots. But as your pregnancy progresses, they're really not such a great idea. There's just so much load on the anterior abdomen. So I think we stopped doing deadlifts probably around month 7. I mean, we kept lightening, and then probably right around month 7, I was like, no, because you can't generate the right amount of force. You can't really generate the right amount of stability. And I also did not want to set myself up for diastasis. Now, I'm sure there'd be a lot of people that would say, well, 7 months is way too long to be going with deadlifts. And then there's other people that say, well, you should deadlift right up till the end. And I think it depends. And I think you've got to know your body. And I think you also have to really perceive that you are mapping your core control well. And this is something I'm intensely passionate about, that in order to do any of these moves, especially while pregnant, you really need to understand the layers of the core. from inside out, from pelvic floor through diaphragm, through intercostals, and each layer, transversus, obliques, rectus, QL, lats, all of the layers, the relationship of the thoracolumbar fascia in its elasticity as it relates to the rectal sheath. So, I mean, this is my bucket. I mean, I spend so much time analyzing the core, dissecting the core, being in my core, and knowing that those muscles are my push muscles also, and what a high value I place on them when in the birthing process. I need to be able to map them. I need to be able to map them so that I can push and release my pelvic floor when I'm giving birth. And it's that same activity, minus the releasing the pelvic floor, that same activity that should be present with every lift you do. Every lift you do. I don't care whether you're doing let me just name a bent press or a push press or a goblet squat or a front squat or a back squat or a pull-up. Like, you've got to be able to generate that sensation, and you've also got to be able to let it go so that the elasticity of those tissues stays healthy. And then now I segue into using tools like the Gorgeous Ball, your breath, and mobilizing all of the joints of the spine as well as the rib attachments to be able to have a pliable, facile, stable, and mobile core that you're in control of, whether you're lifting or whether you're pushing a baby out. So to me, all of it's the same. But as I felt my abdomen growing more and or the baby growing more, and if I were losing sensation, I was like, that's it, cut, done. We're done with that. That piece of the strength pie until further notice.
Makes sense. And I kind of wanted to continue a little bit on that route pre-baby still training, but you bring up diastasis, and diastasis is interesting to me because it's funny.
Or diastasis.
Diastasis, excuse me. But I train a young woman post-labor, and she was hypermobile, and she was managing some issue, and I was the only strength coach she knew because I trained her husband, and she was asking me some advice and what to do. And honestly, having that not being an issue that I work a lot with, I kind of went to the wifey and we picked up some things. And to be honest, it was a big deal, and it was actually a big inspiration for a lot of what went into the Everyday's Back Day program that we wrote, because in my mind, it was really important to give people an awareness of the trunk, an awareness of the core, just so they could feel what that musculature was capable of. And a lot of times, and I think you said it before in our last podcast, that people don't spend enough time with themselves. So a lot of that stuff is some holds for time and some weird kind of contract and relax things. But a lot of it to me was to build that. So I want to hear your recommendations for that. Someone post-labor, they're having some issues, or even post-baby, they want to get back into it. Maybe some general guidelines from you about maybe how to handle an issue or any issues that may come with labor post.
Oh my gosh. I'm not a doula, I'm not a birth consultant, I'm not a PT or an OB.
Yep.
I am a self-study person, and I study a lot. I'm going to throw out two of my favorite resources before I even try to start to answer. My favorite resource is my friend Katie Bowman, who wrote a great book on diastasis recti. And so I still don't know whether I'm supposed to say diastasis or diastasis. So Joe, you can say it any way you want.
I was just repeating how you said it. I looked up the term for the podcast. She wrote it to me. I've talked to Eliza about it. I look at it, and you're the woman here, so we'll go with how you say it there. We'll all figure it out.
I speak English better than Latin.
Yeah,
Danny, you've studied more Latin than us.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those things like, everybody can pronounce it differently. And some things are the same thing, but they're separate names, like fibularis and peroneals. Like, it just depends when you went to school. Or perineals, I guess, is a good way to, that's a good example. Yeah, mm-hmm. So I don't know. It all sounds like a Harry Potter spell to me when you start talking in Latin. So just call it what you want.
Yeah, and the other one is fascia or fascia, And my father, who's a physician, corrects me and says it's so is, not so as.
Nice.
So there you have it. There you have it. Yeah, just Latin pains. Okay. And then my other favorite, so Katie has written a book on diastasis recti. You can find it on Amazon. It's awesome. And really it's about whole body health. It's about how one carries oneself prior to pregnancy, throughout pregnancy, and then post-pregnancy. Secondly, my other favorite resource is, oh, great, Jill. How did you just totally forget her last name? It'll come to me. Her first name is Diane. I have her book on the pelvis.
It'll come
Why?
to you, girl.
It's okay.
I cannot believe I just spaced out on her name.
It's the breastfeeding brain. My wife, it's the same. When she's breastfeeding, I'd ask her a question. She's like, I would have known this if I wasn't breastfeeding.
I think it's the Polish side of her a little bit. That Eastern European's coming out. I mean, I have these moments myself, so it's okay. No worries. We can have Johnny.
It's definitely a breastfeeding brain. It's not Diane Miller, but it's okay. Anyway, but Diane is her person. And she's a world-renowned expert on ribs and abdomen and pelvis, and she's amazing. And she presented at the Fascia Congress in Vancouver. That's how I familiarized myself with her. I was presenting a case study, and she was like a big presenter, and that's how I found out about her. Okay, so your question, let me say something again about the mapping of your innermost abdominal muscles, what I call the inner baby carriage, which is, your postural muscles, which are also breath contributing muscles, and also very highly neurological muscles. These muscles are, especially the diaphragm, give a lot of feedback to the brain about emotional regulation, stress regulation. So being able to have the map of these muscles is critical if you are planning on pushing out your baby. If you're not, if you're a scheduled C-section, then whatever, like you're good. You don't need to push. You're not going to need to really feel these muscles. But if you are planning to push, having a map of these muscles is mandatory, especially if things go a little haywire and you are trying to birth naturally and then you end up needing an epidural for whatever reason. If you've been, and I'm speaking from experience because that's what happened to me. I was like, I'm going natural. And then I ended up needing to have the epidural on, actually on both babies. That's a whole other podcast, but everything's fine. Everybody's healthy. But I wasn't dilating. That's part of it. And then I got the epidural, and within literally 60 minutes on both children, I was ready to push. So it was like, I did most of the work. And then they needed a little help. My cervix needed a little help. But even though I was numb, Danny and Joe, I have recruited this map so many times of how to use my abdominal muscles for intra-abdominal pressure that I was able to birth these babies. Lila came out in 16 minutes and Asher came out in 2 pushes in 6 minutes. So not that it's a race. It's not a race to see how fast you can push a baby out. But it was like, even though those muscles were completely numb, my brain has recruited the pattern so many times. I had no problem pressing the gas pedal and being able to move those babies through me. And so I attribute this to practice. I attribute this to decades of practice. So therefore, after birthing the babies, it was very easy for me to re-sense and re-recruit those tissues. So I advocate that women, whether they're pregnant or not, learn how to activate these tissues. And so I use tools like the Coregeous ball especially, in order to get that feedback. And you can use the Coregeous ball on a pregnant body. You just have to, you don't want to put it on the uterus. You can put it on your side. You can put it above the uterus in the first trimester. But in second and third trimesters, you can use them on your waist to stimulate those tissues. And that stimulation is really important because when you stimulate it, when you arouse the proprioception, it helps with the motor control. It helps give you a sense of where to touch or where to contact or where to contract. So post-labor, some of the stuff I advocate doing is immediately getting into your exhalation. And this is stuff you can see Kelly do a really great version of this on the webinar I did through Creative Live a couple of years ago on healthy pregnancy. And he actually goes over a really, really simple exhalation pattern of activating pelvic floor, activating glutes, activating the innermost abdominals in the course of an exhalation process. It's really a very simple thing to do. And doing that regularly while standing and washing dishes or while you're walking, just reminding yourself to use that exhalation to completion, like to exhale to completion, exhale to tension in these innermost core muscles is the place to start for any woman, no matter what, whether you had a C-section or whether you had stitches in your vagina or whatever. Like, that's where you start in that recruitment process. And then deciding whether or not to load your structure, I think it's going to be very personal. If you're highly conditioned, you can probably you can return to training more quickly than someone who is not doing training throughout the pregnancy. I'm assuming that most of the people who listen to your podcast are into training, and they're probably eager to get back to lifting. But you definitely want to check out the width of your diastasis or your diastasis really soon after giving birth. And there's some I haven't made a video of this on YouTube, but it's a very easy process to do. You can type in check your diastasis, I guess, into Google. But you lay down on your back, you stick your fingers just above your navel or below your navel, and lay completely relaxed. You exhale without tension. So exhaling with tension looks like one thing, and exhaling without tension is a passive exhale. And then slowly raise your head up, and you'll feel the gap between your fingers of how wide that gap is. And that gap is an indicator of whether or not you should move past walking, or you might need to go see a physio to get a program. And I don't have a program for that. I'm knowledgeable about that stuff, but I'm not a programmer for diastasis healing. So I think I sort of answered some of your question, and then I didn't answer a lot of your question, Joe.
No, I think it was good because, I think you gave someone a place to start. And I think a lot of times that's what people are looking for, and it's as easy as getting into that exhale and learning how to go from there. And then, contact a professional and do what you're working with. What was cool about working with Beth is working with her for a long time. And now she's wanting to be like her husband in Oli lift, which is interesting and kind of scary. But where we're starting her off with is kind of like she's up to, finally, this is months of work with her, she's up to overhead squatting, which is really cool. And we're doing some really small kind of segmented pieces of the weightlifting puzzle where we're not doing full snatch work, but what she'll do is, like you said, get her comfortable moving the barbell just overhead explosively and then moving down to that overhead squat. Or what we'll do is, instead of the full lift, we'll put it to her knee and then work to get to her hip. But it's just kind of teaching her that stuff. But it's neat to see that, I don't think of myself ever as a coach that would help a woman with a problem like that. And that was, for me, not even really knowing what it was. So it's just neat to see how some of these simple kind of strength and conditioning concepts can really affect someone like that. And for her, it's affected her quality of life because now she can kind of do some of these moves that her husband does. You know what I mean? So they have some awareness there, which I think is cool.
I think some of the other things that the pregnant body, the pregnant female, or the postpartum female needs to really consider is the sensations of mobility in their pelvis, because the relaxin, it really does a number on every pelvis. It has to. It has to in order to allow that baby's head to get through. Whether it makes that journey or not, whether you're a C-section or not, you're going to have a very unstable pelvis for many, 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 many weeks. And I'm in a body where I know symptoms so well. Like, I know what the sensation of shear at my pubic symphysis feels like. Whereas other women who aren't used to joint articulations or haven't done palpation studies like I have may not be so clear on what feedback they're getting when they palpate their pubic symphysis and feel a certain sensation. And so it can be really scary down there. The SI joints, the feedback they're giving you, the clicking that might be happening, and the likelihood of an offset in the pelvis is very likely after a vaginal birth or not. But that's also likely in a large percentage of the population because of the way they stand anyway, you know. And so the pregnancy is only going to magnify some of the imbalances that may have been precipitated throughout, you know, the first 20, 30, 40 years of a woman's life. And the pregnancy just finishes the distortion, and then you end up creating pain symptoms, especially if you're loading inappropriately in the course of your pregnancy. That's why, I'm so glad that I had Josh's eye on me throughout pregnancy, but I'm also really glad that that movement is my vocation anyway. So it's something I'm passionate about figuring out for myself so that I can share better strategies. But if I can't interpret the weird feelings I'm having, especially if they're painful, then I really need to seek help.
Well, Jill, you mentioned a project you're working on, the Role Model Mama project.
Yeah.
Is that right? Well, tell me about that a little bit. That sounds like this is right, up your alley, obviously.
Yeah, well, I did a webinar through Creative Live when I was pregnant with my first beta, and it was really cool. And I had Katie was on it, Kelly and his wife Juliet were on it, Esther Goclay. She talked about the sort of the pre-industrial spine, the pregnant pre-industrial spine. It was really cool. And Sarah Fragoso came on, did some dietary stuff, and then my friend Dr. Eden Fromberg came on and gave us an osteopathic view of the pregnant body. She's one of the few OBGYN osteopaths that, fascinating work. So anyway, I had done that program, and I did a bunch of different exercise schemas within that, but I hadn't had a child yet. And there was a lot of other stuff that I was doing, and that I wrote the book, The Role Model, came out, and I just kept on getting questions from women about what I did during my pregnancy that was beyond the Creative Live webinar, and what I did postpartum, and then what I did to get pregnant again, and blah, 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 like all of these questions, and people with all these symptoms, and how the therapy balls could be used. And so I decided to do a program to address all of those questions, and to also further the discourse about self-care throughout pregnancy via this medium of soft tissue self-care, breath, posture, and some movement. What Role Model Mama doesn't address is my movement and exercise programming. It addresses the soft tissue self-care, the breathing, and then some amount of positional awareness. But not like in totality. There's no way I could have done everything. And so it's about a 2-hour program that covers the body from head to foot. And we're editing that now. We filmed it 2.5 weeks before I had my baby. And then we were doing some voiceover work on it on the day I went into labor. My water actually broke while we were recording some instructions for an exercise. I was standing there talking into the microphone, and I started feeling a trickle go down my leg, and it was an all too familiar sensation. And then I went to see my doctor, and the rest is history. Then I had my baby just a few hours later.
Water breaking's interesting. The other day I was in the grocery store, and I have good control, I guess, and I'm in there with the 3 kids, and I'm doing my grocery store thing, and I myself, I had a little release because I couldn't get into the potty really quick. Walk the males through.
What?
No, well, I'm sitting there in line. I have 3 kids, and I have to check out. And if you've ever taken 3 kids to the grocery store, that's a pain in the ass enough. But then you're drinking coffee on the way there, and then you're in the checkout line. You have to play this pretty cool. But I will tell you this: I did pee myself a little bit, and I just, it worked.
Was that an involuntary pee or was that a voluntary pee?
Listen, it was all I could do to pee just that little bit. So it was crazy. But I just want you to walk, because we want to bring people together with this podcast. Dr. Danny and Jock Joe here. We bring our we have this cool conversation. So Jill, bring the males a little closer to what a pregnant woman goes through, and just that sensation of water breaking. What kind of goes through your mind? And it's just something we'll never be able to feel, so we might as well have a woman who's gone through it describe it.
Well, first, let's talk about male versus female anatomy.
Okay.
Men have 2 holes, women have 3.
Okay.
And we have the pee hole, we have the vagina, we have the anus. And so what the water breaking feels like is just like a trickle. Okay. Not coming out of your urethra. How does that sound?
Gotcha.
So the one in the middle, that just sounds so. I hope I'm educating you.
It sounds very middle school.
More than sweat trickling down your leg, and it's not like you're releasing it deliberately. Whereas when you're peeing, you have voluntary or involuntary control. With this particular hole, it's a completely involuntary thing, and you could do all the kegling in the world, and that wouldn't stop the trickle from happening. How's that?
Got it. So
well, if we've retained anybody after this point,
no kidding.
I have a phenomenal. I have a patient that I just saw a couple days ago, and she may or may not listen to this, so I am not going to reference her by name. But this story needs to be said because this is the perfect time to do so. And she she had a baby about 6 months ago. Very fit, CrossFitter that I've worked with in the past, and I hadn't seen her in about that long. And she tells me her birth story. I ask about it. It's her first, and she said, "Well, I gave birth myself in the car on the way to the hospital, actually in the parking lot of a fire department." In her sweatpants. Yeah. So she said she was sitting in the back and literally like caught the baby in her sweatpants and gave birth to her own son.
Alone.
And the
Wait, was this her first?
This is her first. Yeah. Her first. So yeah, she had no idea that was going to happen, obviously. And her husband was freaking out. And so anyway, they get to the fire department, and they cut the cord, and she's got the baby, and they're waiting on the ambulance. And there's some guy, probably low man on the totem pole, that they give a trash bag to, and he has to kneel down in front of her in case the placenta comes out to catch it.
Right.
And that was his entire job.
Yeah.
She said, "This is like the worst. This is the worst job for this guy." But yeah, she gave birth to her own kid in her sweatpants in Atlanta. It's the craziest thing.
I know a lot of women with this story, but I haven't heard it frequently with the first. I hear it a lot of times with the second. It just slips out of them. And that's, we are made for baby making and baby laying. Like, we're made for it. And we just get in our own way so much with, I think, the biggest thing that gets in our way is the trappings of, comfort couches and high heel shoes and the challenge of the, common comforts of life and computers and sitting. And I think that, I think we're in our way. We are biologically programmed for this. There's nothing more that we're destined for biologically than procreation. So you can argue with me about that we're supposed to find the meaning of life, but I think we're meant to have babies. We don't have to, but that's biology. No, I'm a biological creature. I don't know about you, but I am.
No, I would agree with you on that, and it's something that I think in a way we've kind of gone over to mask things, right? Because Wifey and I did some Bradley stuff, and for our thing, that was all about awareness and learning the method and being able to coach her through that. And we've been blessed to go through all 3: natural, no drugs, and
you're amazing.
The first kid was 3 pushes, the second one was 2, and the third one kind of just slipped out. And it was painful and it was hard, but she knew what was going on, and we knew what was going to happen. And you're when you're aware of what's going on, it just empowers you to do what you need to do, and you get it done. And I think sometimes we try to not be aware of things, and we're so afraid of the pain, and we're so afraid of what might happen that we don't just let what should happen. So I think that's interesting. We've talked a lot, Jill, about pregnancy. We've talked a lot about a little bit of strength and conditioning. It'd be cool that as we kind of talk about this Role Model Mama course, I know you also have a ton of other offerings. And for me, I'm always getting weightlifters asking me questions about, should I do yoga? Where should I learn to get mobile? Past what you're doing, Joe, what else should we do? For you, Jill, why don't you just kind of lay through some of your course offerings, and maybe we could start with maybe for someone who is barbell heavy, someone who weightlifts, someone who trains, do you have a course offering that you suggest that they would jump into to kind of get to know Jill Miller a little bit more and what she does?
Thank you for asking. My company's called Tune Up Fitness, and we have two main programs, the Yoga Tune Up coursework and then the Role Model coursework. The Role Model really is about the soft tissue self-care, and that's using different therapy balls for soft tissue stimulation and self-massage, relaxation, proprioception, mobility improvement. The Yoga Tune-Up coursework, there's 8 different modules that cover every aspect of the body. Any type of movement professional can benefit from doing coursework with us. And I would say that one of the hallmarks of any of our coursework is that it really helps to push you creatively within your own box. Because a lot of what we do is deconstruct movement. Even though the word yoga is in the title, it's because that's where I started, was as a yoga person. You don't actually need to know yoga to do the work. And I think in our training programs, what we tend to see, the groups of people that assemble are, of course, there's yoga teachers, there's Pilates people, there's personal trainers, there's clinicians, there's massage therapists, and then there's the somatic psychotherapy set. And those are typically the quadrants of the pie that come to our trainings, because we do address the whole person and in every aspect, inside, outside, and what's upstairs and what's downstairs. I have a 40-hour certification program that basically teaches you how to construct classes and introduces you to the paradigm, and that's called the level 1. Then there's a course called the hips immersion, there's the core immersion, and the shoulders immersion, and I think you can imagine what parts of the body those cover. Then we have an integrated embodied anatomy course. And all the courses I'm mentioning, these last 4 are all 3-day. And then the final 3-day course that I have, that's my newest course, is called the Breath and Bliss Immersion. And this course addresses in very, very novel ways and very innovative ways, ways of demystifying and deconstructing the relaxation response in the human body. And this is the course I'm most proud of, and actually this plus the core immersion are some of the content and subject matter of my next book that I'm writing for Victory Belt Publishing, around my core and breath inner body approach. The final 2 courses are the role model courses. So there's 2 day-long role model courses. One's called The Science of Rolling, which helps you to understand pain physiology, fascia geography, and ball choreography. And then the other one is called Ball Sequencing and Innovation, that teaches you how to be able to innovate for context with any type of group. And, the groups I mentioned that come to our trainings, we have people that are working with, every aspect of the movement and clinical field. So from professional sports teams to medical institutions that I can't name, to military, to group fitness. I've created programs at 24-Hour Fitness, Equinox Fitness Clubs, Yoga Works, and then mom and pop stuff all over the country. And our teachers teach wherever they want. We don't regulate any of their teaching. People come to improve their ability to map their own body, to be able to innovate, and to be a part of a collection of an incredibly innovative tribe of movement thinkers and movement doers.
Well, I think the one that I can speak to is the kind of down regulation breath and bliss course, I believe is what it's called. And when I went to that out in Austin, it was really cool. I mean, we talk a lot about people getting tight, and these high threshold strategies that people are trying to develop post pregnancy or for hypermobility. But I would say just as much of a problem as not being able to relax or not having the awareness of the amount of tension that people are carrying around, in particular posturally. And that course was great because my favorite tool that you have is the Yoga Tune-Up Plus balls.
The Plus. Mm-hmm.
I give those things out like candy. I mean, like if you're in my family and you haven't got a set of those yet,
Aww.
You're getting one for Christmas because no kidding. It's a cool tool. No, I mean, hey, Kelly's stuff is awesome. I think it's great, but it's also for somebody that needs something more aggressive. And the Tune-Up Plus balls in particular, they're a little bit bigger, but they have a really good feel to them. It kind of mimics like thumb pressure, in my opinion. So we went over how to use those as well as like some in the Courgeous ball as well. But that course was awesome, and just the amount of energy I got out of the afternoon, or I guess the evening that I spent in Austin was really impressive. And that's, I didn't go through the 3-day portion of it, just the first portion of it on that Friday. But for anybody that is interested in something like that, what's the whole emphasis of that course in particular? Because I think that is just very under kind of utilized in the strength and conditioning community.
So really the way to frame it for the strength and conditioning community is recovery strategies.
Right.
And that's one of the things that we really concentrate on is being able to communicate to these different communities, like what's the value of this for you? What's in it for me? And I think that, you can only put out as much as you're putting in. And one of the nutrients that your body needs for regulation is to spend really good concentrated amounts of time in parasympathetic states of, deep rest. And that deep rest can be triggered through different gateways. And I don't think we utilize all of those avenues for our recovery response. And so in the Breath and Bliss immersion, and what you did, I think you did like a 2-hour workshop version of this. In the Breath and Bliss immersion is 3 days of going over and embodied explorations of these different ways you can trigger the relaxation response in the human body. And so this can be used in part or whole within any strength and conditioning recovery, post-workout or post event. You got to cool down when you get back to the hotel room that night. You're like, well, maybe if I just drink a couple of beers, that'll help me. But it doesn't really help you neurologically. It doesn't really help the whole system to enter into those phases. You want to be able to stimulate the vagus nerve. You want to be able to cool down that sympathetic outflow in a really coddled, pampered way, just the same way you would, you swaddle and rock an infant. I mean, we actually go over rocking strategies. We go over swaddling, like adult swaddling strategies. We don't go over sucking.
Awesome.
Like I don't have everybody sucking their thumbs, but we should. But there's a lot of different novel ways that we turn this system on that I think are, probably underutilized in a lot of different communities. And oh my, it's so good also if you want to jumpstart a meditation practice or a breathing strategy type of meditation practice.
It's funny you bring up sucking your thumb, and
oh God.
I know you work a little bit, I know Kelly, and I know on Instagram, because I am an Instagram stalker. People I like, I stalk them. I'm the kind of guy that will go way back in a feed and see what's going on. But I also know that you've tagged like Joe DeFranco a few times, and you have a small relationship with him to some degree. I'm not exactly to what extent, but I know you've tagged him. But I just have this image of Kelly and Joe sucking their thumb. Not just because it brought up, and we're talking about strength and conditioning, and I don't know why, but in my mind, when you talk about reaching out to these communities, even talking to guys like Kelly and Joe about these soothing strategies, what's your deal with? I mean, how do you, if you have big strong strength coach in there, and you might not you might be getting some pushback or they're not buying in. I mean, how do you get them to come into your area and feel comfortable?
First of all, I have to admit I'm nursing my son right now because we went a little past his time and he's like really pissed off.
Okay.
So
you just gained so much like street cred with all the female listeners that we have here. Like, and my wife, she's gonna be like, "Fuck yeah!" Like Jill Miller is awesome. Yeah. So don't worry about it. It's all good.
And I positioned the camera just so that he's off camera. We're good. It's all PG here. What is the take back breastfeeding? Oh, great. Now I'm not going to be able to think straight, you guys. You are going to witness an oxytocin.
Oh, what's the matter, baby? You don't want me to do this? Oh, what happened?
If we have to,
Let me just talk a little more quietly.
Yeah, I was going to say, Joe, do not feel obligated. We can, you're nursing your child. It's okay.
So, I think we're good. I think I talked too loud for a moment because you know what? One of the ways to soothe is through your voice and to have a really delicate way of speaking. So, yeah, I didn't want to name drop Joe DeFranco, but I will. He loves recovery because he's so keyed up, and he is such a human experiment. I call him my what do I call him? I can't remember, but he is like he is a laboratory. He's a human laboratory. Oh, I know what I call him. My specimen. He's my specimen.
Nice.
Thank you. Because he has been such a great example of sort of adding in, and not homeopathic doses, but adding in some of these recovery strategies into his own practice. So he came to the Breath and Bliss immersion in New York last April when I taught it there, this 3-day course. And Joe is very open. He talks on his own podcast about how he hasn't had more than 4 hours of sleep in 5 years. Like, he's a horrible sleeper. And are you raising your hand, Joe?
I'm up there with that. I'm one of those guys.
Wow. So, the first day that he did the course, which was, I think, 6 hours of what I'm talking about, he went home and he slept 9 straight hours for the first time in 5 years. And, that kind of personal evidence, there's nothing like it. There's no drug, no narcotic, no when you taste that you self-generated that, it's kind of like no turning back. When you open the drugstore of your own physiology and experience this, states of pleasure and states of balance that you self-generated, it's very gratifying and it sells you. And that's why he tags me on Instagram, Joe and Danny.
Yeah, it sounds like he's almost like, I hate to bring up, like, we've talked about so many great terms. I hate to bring up, like, I'll just say it, like, it's like sleep masturbation or something. I don't know how to say it. It's just, there's a kind of
what did you just say?
There's kind of a self-gratification to it, right? That when you do it yourself, is that what we're getting after? It's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm getting the oxytocin. But no, when you kind of, I'm off on the wrong limb here. We're working that
exactly
out. But
right. That's I'm
good,
with
man.
you.
Yeah, you should TM that.
Yeah. Okay. TM it. Trademark it. Got it. We're gonna do it. Well, Danny, I don't know. I think we should let Jill and the little one do their thing. But Danny, any final thoughts here? What an interesting conversation. We went from strength and conditioning to yogi to nursing to all Jill's great course offerings. Jill, what's the website where folks can find you to knock that out?
Knock it out. yogatuneup.com is where you'll find everything. And you can also go to our parent website, Tune Up Fitness. But if you go to yogatuneup.com, you'll also be able to enter your zip code and you'll be able to find a teacher in your area. We have about 500 teachers worldwide. most prevalent in the U.S. obviously, but tons in Canada, Japan, the UK. I'm going to be heading over to Europe again next year at some point, and Canada, and we're all over the place.
Oh, that's great. This has been a great conversation. I mean, we knew it would be. Jill, you're one of our favorite guests. I think it sounds like we got to get our boy Joe out to your next bliss and breathing course. He needs to take it easy.
Well, yeah. I want to pitch that because the last weekend of January, I'll be breaking my maternity leave, and I'm doing it out here in LA. Like, what better place to come to in January but LA, and to bliss out, like, for real. And you can go eat vegan food if you want, or you can get steak across the street. Either one.
Well, it won't be vegan food. I'm actually next weekend going to Vermont to harvest a bear with my buddy.
Right. Right.
But we're going to work all out. But Jill, great. We're going to look out for this the Breath and Bliss immersion course. Definitely on the radar. But I'm only doing it if you're teaching it. So
I'm teaching it.
We're going to work that out. But Jill, great talk. Feed that boy up. Fill him up. And Danny, if you have a body,
you're an athlete.